With the first pick in the 2023 NFL Draft, Carolina Panthers select
Trophy Chase, Tucson, Arizona.
With the second pick in the 2023 NFL Draft, the Houston Texans select
Cody Smith, Houston Texans. The fantasy draft room is now on the clock.
Welcome to the fantasy draft room. I am Chase. With me, as always, my man Cody. What is going on tonight, my friend?
Not too much, man. We got the AFC North and NFC North kicking off tonight. The series we're recording the AFC as you all are watching this one. So we're going to go through all the four teams, talk about every single player who is fantasy relevant in any format that you should be playing. If you're playing in maybe start 16 lineups, maybe we're not going to talk about your guys tonight, but anything else, start 12 and below, we're going to cover them. Best ball lineup, redraft, dynasty, anything that you want. We're going to talk about all these guys, going through everything through the AFC North teams tonight.
Love it, man. Let's kick things off here with the Baltimore Ravens and probably one of the most fascinating teams this offseason. Lamar Jackson gets his contract, have a new offensive coordinator, finally. And so they do bring in Monken from Georgia, and we'll see kind of what Todd Monken's offense looks like back in the NFL again. We've seen what it looked like in Tampa, so really excited to see this offense on the field. But really, we got Lamar Jackson at quarterback, and I do want to touch on the running backs as well. We got J.K. Dobbins, and then the depth, I guess, of Gus Edwards, Justice Hill, and Melvin Gordon. What do you think of this running back room? Obviously Lamar, he's good.
Obviously, Lamar Jackson, I think we can finally say Lamar Jackson is not the running back one, even though he will have a large running role in this offense. The conversations of Lamar Jackson just being running back are absolutely over. This is going to be an offense that probably limits Lamar Jackson a little bit in the rushing game because he's going to be a drop back passer a little bit more. So I do think that this offense will allow for a little bit more production from the running backs, specifically though the area where we like it most. We have never seen this offense throw a lot to the running backs through the passing game, and that is where I think J.K. Dobbins can really take a step forward this year. I don't think that is Gus Edwards' specialty. Justice Hill's specialty used to be Melvin Gordon's specialty, but now his specialty is fumbling. So I think that it's J.K. Dobbins who is actually going to take over that role and really could be one of these guys who is fighting for an RB1 overall season, not an RB1 overall in terms of running backs, but a top 12 RB finish at the running back position for J.K. Dobbins this year. I think that is very well within the range of outcomes if he is actually able to take over a large portion of this passing game.
Yeah, I think it might be worth, like, in deep leagues, you can have Gus Edwards as a I guess the 40%er in this offense. Like maybe in a best ball league, you're not starting Gus Edwards, so like really the rest of them are just kind of guys. But J.K. Dobbins, I've been super high on throughout his career. Unfortunately, the knee got torn up, but we saw what he could do down the stretch. If they do decide to give him passing work like they talked about going into his second year prior to the ACL tear, I'm super optimistic about what J.K. Dobbins can be. So I don't want to go too crazy, like you said, RB1 overall, like. Me and
no. Just the top 12 season.
Top 12, but like me and Ben Mason have been saying, like, that's the RB1 overall, man. I think he could be top 6. If they give him passing work, I think he could be top 6. I'm willing to go out and say that if he does get targets. But if not, then he's just going to be, back end RB1, best case scenario. So still love me some JK. I think where he's going in drafts and what his dynasty value is right now, he's super undervalued. So I would at least check around. I'm sure some leagues he's valued appropriately, but what we talked about it earlier, Keep Cut had him like sandwiched between Zach Charbonnet and James Cook. So,
and I'd infinitely over those two.
Yeah, I'm taking J.K. Dobbins. So yeah, that's kind of where we're at with that. Looking at the wide receiver core, this is the first time I think the Ravens have actually had, I'm going to say, a decent wide receiver core.
Are we actually excited about a Ravens wide receiver core outside of just like maybe an incoming rookie or just like one guy? I mean, obviously this offense is still probably going to funnel a lot through Mark Andrews, But we have 3 actual wide receivers, and we haven't been able to say that about the Baltimore wide receiving core for a long, long while. Whenever your leading wide receiver, I believe it was Demarcus Robinson last year, was actually your leading wide receiver in terms of yards and targets and catches and everything, it is not a good year for wide receivers in your team. Now, with a questionably healthy Rashad Bateman, we'll see if he can get back to the field and actually stay healthy throughout the year. You do have again, questionable Odell Beckham, and can he not be washed? I think he's perfectly fine, at least for this year. As long as he can stay healthy, I think he's fine right now. It's just a matter of can he endure throughout a 17-week season. But then Zay Flowers, the rookie, man, one of the best rookies that we have seen throughout all of the offseason, throughout all of these preseason games. Zay Flowers has really been one of those guys who has been showing out, balling out, and looks like he could take over as a wide receiver 1 for this offense. Do you see that becoming a thing in year 1? Or do you see as I think it's a little bit more of a split between all 3 of these guys year 1, but I think Zay Flowers has that upside to take over in the next coming years or maybe down the stretch a little bit more.
Yeah, I think it's the down the stretch thing is what it feels like. I could definitely see him taking over. It all comes down to what you mentioned earlier with the other 2 in Bateman and Beckham is health. I could see this wide receiver room being really exciting for the NFL, and I could see it also being just Zay Flowers out there as the wide receiver 1, and then you have Nelson Aguilar and Devin Duvernay as your 2 and 3 at some point just because of injury. And I really hope that's not the case. I don't like to go that negative, but we've seen the injury history with Odell, Rashad Bateman, same thing. It's he struggled staying healthy throughout his career, so I'm optimistic for them as an offense in terms of guys I want to start. Like if healthy, I do want to start Odell Beckham. I do think that he's going to be good. But if all 3 of these guys, if it's an even distribution, there's no like, oh, we're just gonna, we're gonna give Odell his 10 targets a game and just feed Odell. I think it's going to be a fairly even split for most part, or you're going to have a tough time predicting which game Zay Flowers is going to get 8 targets and go for 100 yards and a touchdown. It's going to be really tough to predict. So best ball, I'm interested in all these guys, but lineup leagues, I don't feel confident really if I have to start some of these guys, especially in the start 10. I would, start 11, start 12, start 13. Sure, I'd be okay with it, but I just don't want to start these guys week in and week out for fantasy purposes.
It's the issue that I had whenever I first tried to project this offense out. Now, I think I would change it a little bit more just to have Zay Flowers a little bit over Rashad Bateman. I'm kind of over the Rashad Bateman hype, where I think he's just kind of had too many injuries, sustained too much, where I don't know if he can really be. I think he's going to be the 3 on this offense, probably from day 1, unfortunately, even though I really liked the talent whenever he was coming out. Zay Flowers just really does look like that dude. Now, maybe it's a little bit of a preseason overreaction pod plug right there, but it does feel like Zay Flowers looks like that. They were saying he was the Antonio Brown light whenever he was in college, whenever he was coming out as a prospect, and man, throughout preseason he has looked every bit the part. And so, I mean, if we're just talking a little bit of dynasty here real quick, on KTC, it is Jerry Jeudy, Zay Flowers, George Pickens, Calvin Ridley. If you had to take a guy between all of those 4, would it be Zay Flowers? Or I think honestly, Jerry Jeudy and Calvin Ridley can be a little bit in that conversation. Obviously, on this show, George Pickens, you're not in that group for me.
Yeah, he's getting cut out. I do think that Jeudy, that's the thing is I think Zay Flowers has the longevity to at least sustain his dynasty value, barring him sucking and being just total ass. But Jerry Jeudy, this is a make or break year. Calvin Ridley, same kind of thing. Like if you don't see it from them this year, people are going to punt them. And so Zay Flowers, I think, will have the longer sustainability at the position and the more, opportunity to excel. So yeah, I love Zay Flowers. I actually want to acquire some more Zay Flowers. It was really tough, unfortunately, him going in the back of first, and I usually trade my first round picks, especially my late ones. So sometimes that's just the nature of the beast. But yeah, I do want Zay Flowers in dynasty. I think I'd feel comfortable starting him over all these guys unless Odell is healthy, and then Odell's my guy. But obviously, we're starting Mark Andrews. Where are you at with Isaiah Likely, Charlie Kolar, Travis Vokolek?
Charlie Kolar, and obviously you're a Nebraska Husker, Travis Vokolek. I don't really think they have an opportunity on any fantasy football team this year. You've already got two guys in front of them. That's going to be like the receiving option 9 on the team. No, that's not happening. But Isaiah Likely is a very intriguing one that we have seen get a lot of hype throughout this offseason, because with this new offensive scheme and kind of with the old scheme a little bit merged into it, we saw a lot of 2 tight end sets throughout with this team. Now, does that continue? We've seen a lot of it through preseason, and Isaiah Likely has been on the field a good bit with the first team, along with Mark Andrews out there potentially. I don't know if he's been really starting every single game out here, but Isaiah Likely has been on the field with the ones a lot. What is his role whenever the ones are all out there? I don't see how you can put all the formation out there of 3 wide receivers, 2 tight ends, or running back. Like it just doesn't make sense mathematically to get that to 11 personnel at the end of the day, right? So how much is Isaiah Likely out there? I think it's going to be a little bit of a hybrid between the two, at least in this first year when Lamar Jackson is making the transition from this ancient ass Greg Roman offense to this new school air raid hybrid offense. Like, I think it's going to be a little bit of an in between. So I think Isaiah Likely could really succeed in this first year. Where he's really important, though, I mean, it's going to be in your tight end premium leagues, your start 2 tight ends. I don't think he really has much of legs outside of that. Not really a guy that I'm looking to outside of injury of Mark Andrews.
Yeah, I feel like my whole thing with Isaiah Likely, I want him in best ball. I'm totally good with that because I don't have to figure out when he's going to score those touchdowns, when he's going to catch that random 5 catches, 50 yards and 2 touchdowns type of game. Like, I don't have to pick him out. And I think that's going to be the struggle. If you have him in lineup and you're starting him, you're probably not a contender. You're probably not doing all that great. Like, just being honest, even in 2 tight end, like, I would not feel great about starting Isaiah Likely. So I do, again, want him for best ball, but I don't want to have to pick and choose which games those are, because if you don't pick the right ones, you're getting a 0 in your lineup, most likely. So to wrap up the Ravens, we do have Patrick Ricard, not fantasy relevant. And then our guy, Ben Mason, just hiding here on the second team fullback. Big shout out to Ben Mason from Heisman. Didn't realize you played football too. You were keeping this from us this whole time. You
thought he was just a guy living in Virginia out in the sticks, and apparently he's actually traveling to Maryland to play in these games. I mean, it's
no wonder he's so tired.
It fully makes sense now. Shout out to Ben Mason, man.
All right, let's move things on here. Let's get into the Cincinnati Bengals. And obviously Joe Burrow, top 5 quarterback, top 4 quarterback, however you want to really look at him. His calf injury should be fine. Week 1 is what it sounds like.
Nothing burger for me, man. Absolutely. Just I'm not even paying attention to it. He probably wasn't going to play more than 2 series in this entire preseason, if any. This doesn't really change anything for me. He's going to be fully out there, healthy, ready to go by week 1, unless we hear something of a setback. We haven't heard that yet.
Then let's dive into running back here, because Joe Mixon's had a tumultuous offseason. Seems like he's gotten things figured out in the contract realm. He's gotten things figured out off the field. So on the field, it looks like it's Joe Mixon, RB1 on this team, followed by Chris Evans, Chase Brown, and then Travion Williams. And as much as we all wanted Chase Brown to have that pass catching role or have some sort of role, it does look like Chris Evans is actually going to be the RB2 on this team. But in the end, I don't know if it matters. What do you think of this running back room? Do you think Joe Mixon can get 70% of the work? I mean, what's this offense looking like to you?
It's probably going to look a lot like it did last year, to be honest. Samaje Perine or this year's Chris Evans, apparently, like, he's going to be very much needed to be rostered. The fact that he's not rostered, I mean, I just went through on a lot of my dynasty rosters right now, and Chris Evans is a free agent in a good amount of them. I mean, I've been a Travion Williams guy, maybe just a little bit of the homer in me from Texas A&M. Just in, like, maybe it's year 4, but Chris Evans is also about there at the same point right now. Like, just, it's never happened, but it finally feels like it's going to, because everything pointing to it says that Chase Brown, at least week 1, is not going to be that guy that is taking over the running back 2 role. And it's at least a valuable role. They will get snaps. Joe Mixon's not going to be out there for 95% of snaps week 1. That's just not going to happen. And it's one of the most high leveraged, high valued positions. This is what we saw from Samaje Perine last year. This is why we see Samaje Perine randomly going in like the 8th round of redraft leagues this year, because people think he's actually good just because he was serving one of the best offenses in the league last year. Like, he's actually not that, like, he's a very good role player for an offense, but he's nothing more than just an average across the league running back. Chris Evans can fill that role and be a very good RB2 if his name is called upon. If Joe Mixon ever goes down, as it stands right now for this roster, he's one of the most high valued running back replacements in the league. He should be owned everywhere. And honestly, if you want to take an 18th round dart throw in a redraft lineup, in a redraft league even, I think you can take one there on Chris Evans. And I would never have been saying that even 1-2 over the last 3 years of Chris Evans' career. He has never been that, but he finally looks to be that right now.
Yeah, I mean, Chris Evans, you'll know when to start him in your lineup leagues, best ball leagues. He might happen to get a few catches for a touchdown, similar to what Samaje Perine did, break one off, and then it's like, okay, there you go, he cracks your lineup. But for the most part, I'm only wanting to start Joe Mixon. As far as lineup leagues go.
Yep.
That's really the only guy. I do think he has top 12 running back potential, but he's also just like, RB2, back end RB1, best case scenario, just because of what his efficiency has been, the lack of touchdowns. I know he's been hit or maybe he had one game with 5 last year, and then outside of that, I think he only had 2. So it's like it was really inconsistent for him last year. There's probably going to be some positive regression in that realm. But at the same time, I just don't know what Joe Mixon is at age 28, 29 of his career. I mean, he had under 4 yards a carry last year. It wasn't pretty, but he is getting targets. He is getting, the workload. So in the end, you want to start him. Obviously, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, those are starters for you. Tyler Boyd, best ball dart, in my opinion. Again, it's one of those situations, unless that's a start 13 league, I don't really want to be starting Tyler Boyd. He will have some big games, but you don't want to have to start that guy. Like, that's really what it comes down to. Unless Higgins or Chase are out for a game, he's just going to be a best ball dart throw, but a good one, a very good dart throw.
Yeah, I mean, he looks like typically a 5 for 55 wide receiver week over week. And you never want to start that. But whenever one of those two goes down, like you just said, he could go out there and go 10 for 101. Like that week is always going to be possible for him. Even whenever these two are in there, that could be a possible week. If he just breaks one, he's going to be an integral part of this offense. None of these other guys are, though, in my opinion, outside of injury. I mean, Trenton Irwin, we saw a couple weeks from him down the stretch. Whenever there were some injuries, he just caught a couple touchdowns in one game. Don't really have much hope there outside of just your deepest of deep best ball lineups and dynasty. I mean, if you're on a 40-man roster, maybe you can take a Trenton Irwin. Charlie Jones, almost the same thing. The only difference is there that he kind of projects, quote unquote, to take the Tyler Boyd role maybe next year. So if you want to play a long game, but I'm never doing that with a wide receiver. No. Andre Iosivas has had some hype during camp. I think he's basically just like Charlie Jones, like basically which one do you want to take the bet on? I don't really want either of them. If I have the choice to not roster either of them, I won't. And so I think that you're looking at a big top 3 here. This is kind of like it's a little bit of a more spread out version of like the Jalen Hurts Eagles offense, where they're going to pass a lot more, but it's going to be pretty centralized around just Chase and T. Higgins, and then Tyler Boyd's a slot. Between those 4 guys of Mixon, Chase, Higgins, and Boyd, I don't really want any of these guys in almost any format.
Yeah, I feel like Charlie Jones, Andre Iosivas, it's just the rookie excitement, and maybe they can improve, or maybe they can have an opportunity in the future. But we've seen how frivolous that exercise is of holding a rookie wide receiver that doesn't really have draft capital. Another name I just want to say is Mac Hippenhammer. Like, what a name. Wide receiver depth chart buried here, but Mac Hippenhammer. I just want you to get on the field so I can hear some announcers say your name. I mean, obviously for that to happen, injuries have occurred, but come on, Hippenhammer. Let's see what you can do. But yeah,
I'm gonna have to do a deep dive into Hippenhammer tonight after we get off the pod. After we get off the camera,
some film. We need to go grind some Hippenhammer film.
I'm gonna come back to you in just a bit. While we're in the next team, I'm gonna have an interlude of just like Mac Hippenhammer highlights and where he went and what he did to come to this point. Because Mac Hippenhammer, I guarantee, is an absolute baller. But if you want to talk about absolute ballers, it's probably not Irv Smith at tight end, as much as people want to say that he is going, he's every year we say this with all these high powered offenses, it's Irv Smith is going to be the tight end one. When has a tight end ever mattered in the Cincinnati Bengals offense? has never done it, has never done it with Joe Burrow. It's just not what they use in this offense. And so you have to look at more than just what you project to be the opportunity for Irv Smith this year and say, what is the opportunity for the historical production of this offense been under the same head coach, under the same offensive scheme and format? I just like, he's a mid tight end 2 for me. And if you need that in whatever league format you're playing in, by all means, go ahead and try to pick him up and try to stash him for that. I just don't think he's anything more.
Yeah, it's best ball. I think he'll have a couple games where he'll score a touchdown or, get 6, 7, 8 targets just in a game or two, just because that's what'll happen. I mean, we had Hayden Hurst last year have a couple games that you were excited about. But again, lineup leagues, like you're just guessing. You're absolutely guessing which games that he's going to actually play well. I like Herb Smith. I really do like the player. I really hope for the best for him. But coming off injury, I don't know what kind of player he is. None of these other tight ends I really care about either. Sample, Asiasi, Mitchell Wilcox. I would roster, I guess, Irv Smith in certain leagues, but for the most part, he's just going to be a tight end dart that I have in best ball. So that pretty much wraps things up here for the Cincinnati Bengals as you do some deep dive into Hip and Hammer. Let's move things over here to Deshaun Watson and the Cleveland Browns. There's been, I guess it's been kind of quiet really with what's going on with Deshaun Watson. Sounds like everything was going really, going well, progressing the way we thought. And then all of a sudden you hear a random thing about Deshaun Watson not playing all that well, not, stringing together consecutive passes. Sounds like it's an off season kind of just rumor mill type of thing. But I think fantasy players want to see Deshaun Watson actually do something early in this season before they buy back in.
Yeah, obviously the reports out of camp haven't been glowing for this offense. I mean, it's weird. You've seen all the reports of all these touchdowns coming out, but then everybody else says at the end of the day, it doesn't really look all that great. It's very confusing by what the Cleveland Browns PR and their guys have been putting out. Obviously, if I just want to look at last year, and I'm not taking too much into account of what the preseason has been telling us, because all of these beat reporters, I mean, like I've heard a lot of NFL people talk about it, and they're like, every time that the beat reporter says that it's a bad camp, it's one of the best camps that we've ever had. And whenever they say it's a really good camp, we're like, I mean, we need to work on a lot of shit here. Like it doesn't really seem to translate that much whenever you're just sitting on the sidelines and saying, is it really good or is it really bad? There's a lot more nuance to it. So I'm not really taking in too much to account of some of the bad reports that have come out. I'm going to stick more. Maybe it's just because of the personal bias and I have a couple shares that it's looked good. He's got a really good connection with Amari Cooper, Elijah Moore, and David Njoku. I've seen all those guys have a lot of touchdowns come out throughout all of the camp. Anything that you're basing on last year, I think is just absolutely a wash. If you remember at the beginning of last year, everybody said, hey, whenever we're going in, like he hasn't played football in so long, it's not going to be pretty this year. And it wasn't. I will fully admit that it was not pretty last year, but like it wasn't going to be. He was away from the facility. He didn't have time to really sit there, learn with the offense, get acquainted to everybody, get those reps with everybody. And then he comes in and tries to pick up the pieces. It wasn't going to be good. Now he has this off season. He has a full training camp and a full preseason to get accustomed to these guys. I think we have a possibility to see what we saw from Deshaun Watson in a Houston Texans uniform, now in a Cleveland Browns uniform, especially with one of the best offenses that he's really ever had, minus, DeAndre Hopkins is probably the best receiver that he's ever played with by far and away. But, Amari Cooper's a damn good wide receiver. Nick Chubb's one of the best runners in the NFL. Elijah Moore, this is not a bad offense, and I think he can really do well here. It's just going to be a little bit more controlled. And does that quarterback 5 upside still hold itself to it? Like, I don't think so, but I think Deshaun Watson can easily be between that QB6 and QB12 if everything does go right and get back to normal for him.
Yeah, I mean, like you mentioned, like we knew this was going into last year, that we knew that he had the long layoff and that it was going to take some time to shake that rust off. And it's not like Jamar Chase taking a year off of football where he's going to go back out there and run routes and just learn the offense again. It takes time to process things as a quarterback. Like you have to break everything down. You have to get back to game speed and seeing what those defenses are actually going to be throwing at you, and that's going to take time in itself. Let alone to shake off the actual rust of throwing a football. The quarterback position is the toughest position to play in the game, and it's for a reason. So I'm optimistic in thinking that Deshaun Watson can be that top 12 quarterback for sure. But it won't take much for dynasty managers to full on panic if things don't look good early. So right, wrong, or otherwise, there might be a buy window for Deshaun Watson if you still believe in him long term, which I do. So no matter what, he's starting for the next 4 years.
At least two. I think probably like year 3 they could probably get out of it by then. But
That
hey,
contract, though, it's all guaranteed. Like they can't.
I mean,
Just
it's guaranteed, but they can at least offset it far enough off into the future that they could probably get out of it in about 2 years. But he's going to be, unless catastrophic things happen, he's going to be the starter for the next 2 years.
Yeah.
However, man, DTR is going to be a high leverage backup. He has been showing out throughout the preseason. Man, you can say all you want, but man, that dude is an absolute dog. If you're getting personal fouls called on you for unnecessary roughness in a preseason game because you're launching your body into blocks, I absolutely love that. Now, does it mean anything for fantasy? No. But the dude is a dog, absolute dog, and he has definitely overtaken Joshua Dobbs and Kellen Mond as the QB2 of this team. Absolutely love the kid, and if anything ever did happen to Deshaun Watson, he's the QB2. So if you ever need a backup for the Cleveland Browns, it's DTR. No hands, ifs, or but it is DTR.
I'm just going to leave it at that. You have fun with that one. It is Deshaun Watson and nobody else. But yeah, we have Nick Chubb here. It sounds like they're trying to bring in another running back. Jerome Ford banged up. Demetric Felton, meh. John Kelly, meh. Like it's Nick Chubb's show. But I do think that they need to add someone to this running back room. Whom that's going to be? Will they bring back Kareem Hunt? Will they bring in Leonard Fournette? Is it just going to be another body? Most likely, but that's the thing, is this is the Nick Chubb show. That's the only one I want in this running back room. Do not care about anybody else in terms of rostering. I don't like to cuff, especially when they're just, they have no fantasy relevance if Nick Chubb gets hurt. So that's pretty much it there. Wide receiver core, you mentioned Amari Cooper, Elijah Moore, DPJ. There's said Tillman that was drafted this year. David Bell seems dead. Who do you want to start? I mean, is it just Amari Cooper that you want to start, and the rest of these guys are more best ball opportunities?
Elijah Moore's fringe for me. I think he can get there dependent upon what the run to pass ratio in this offense is, and what his target share could potentially be, especially if you really only have Nick Chubb back here. He's obviously never been a guy who's really commanded a large workload out of the backfield in the receiving game. So Elijah Moore could be one of those guys that, like a Michael Gallup, Brandon Cooks type. Can he get to 850 yards and be serviceable as your flex number 2? I think that's kind of the role that he would serve, but it's never a guy that I want to start. It's just a guy that could potentially serve the role. DPJ is purely best ball, dart flex for me outside of an injury. Said Tillman, if you want to stash him for some long-term upside, he's there. But David Bell, Marquise Goodwin, the only reason that I have him is because he can fill an IR slot right now. And he can potentially serve as a DPJ replacement if he does get off of IR and then DPJ does get hurt and then he takes the role. It's a lot of things, but it's that 1% margin edge grinding that I love to do in some dynasty leagues. So I have some Marquise Goodwin. Other than that, no, none of these guys are going to be anything. And really, you're only looking at Amari Cooper, Elijah Moore, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, obviously David Njoku's the main one here. I think Jordan Akins will be a nice best ball tight end. He'll have some games where he just happens to get a couple touchdowns. That's just what he does. But yeah, for the most part, David Njoku, he's the one I want to start. And then I do want to see Elijah Moore. I want to see what happens with this wide receiver 2 position on this team, just because we haven't really seen this team with a solid wide receiver 2. I mean, DPJ had a decent year last year. But yeah, I want to see the offense evolve the way that they're talking about it evolving. I just have never seen it. So until I do, I'm not going to fully believe it and buy in. And I know we've all had Elijah Moore hype. I just can't do it, man. I just can't. People want seconds for him, and I'm just like maybe.
No, for me, it's Amari Cooper and David Njoku. David Njoku, I think, does have like a top 8 tight end upside. Now, what does that really matter? I think I don't think he's like in that top 5 tight end upside, but I think he is in that like 6 to 8, which is that like serviceable, but you don't really rely on him week to week to like really make a true difference for your team. I think he's just kind of in that range, but he's going to be one of the more consistent guys. I think he's going to be heavily targeted in the offense, and then you're just kind of relying on the touchdown upside after that. But do think that he's one of the better tight ends in the league. Unless you have anything other than that, I have an update for us.
I'm all ears.
All right, Mac Hippenhammer, the wide receiver out of the Miami Redhawks, is a 5'11", 190 redshirt senior. He used to play at Penn State, and his high school was Nelson R. Snyder. He has had seasons such as his freshman year or his redshirt freshman year, 5 receptions, 77 yards, 48 receptions, 786 yards, 5 touchdowns and 54 receptions, 800 yards and 9 touchdowns. Dude sounds like an absolute baller. So, guy who transferred out of Penn State, went to the Miami, Ohio Redhawks. Probably nothing. But Mac Hippenhammer, if you ever become something, you are going to be. I will make room on my dynasty roster for you because that name is freaking awesome, and I will be the C. Smith TFDR Hippenhammers every single time if you actually become a starter in the NFL.
As soon as I saw that name at the bottom of the depth chart, I was like, I just have to say it. We just got to talk about it for just a minute here. Like, what a name. But yeah, last team here in the AFC North, we have the true dog is on this team apparently, but we have this Pittsburgh Steelers, and we have Kenny Pickett, who's actually looked really good here in preseason. Seems like year 2 things are kind of coming together. That team had an awful offensive line last year, tough time with a rookie quarterback. I guess last year it was Mitch Trubisky's show at the start, and then Kenny Pickett got eased in and took over. It's his job this year. It is just Kenny Pickett. He's a QB2. I think that's what he's going to be. I don't anticipate him cracking that, Jared Goff and Kirk Cousins range. Like that's what you hope for. But I am optimistic about this offense just because it is, there are weapons and it is a Mike Tomlin offense. And so anytime you have that kind of combination, I could see Kenny Pickett having some really good games, but in the end, they're going to be handing the ball off to Najee Harris quite a bit. Jaylen Warren getting involved. What do you think of this offense? Where are you at with Pickett and these running backs?
I mean, you say it's a Mike Tomlin offense, but it's really a Matt Canada offense. We've seen it's unfortunate because everybody pretty much it's been 2 teams in the AFC North we've wanted. It's been Greg Roman fired, that's what we wanted, and then it's been Matt Canada please fired. We got one, we didn't get the other. We got the Todd Monken replacement, and we love that one for fantasy, but we did not get a Matt Canada replacement. However, everything through the preseason seems to be really good. Kenny Pickett is hitting 40-yard dart strikes across the middle of the Pat Freiermuth. I mean, it looks really good here. The offensive line obviously has gotten improvement. You bring in basically an offensive lineman in the tight end of Darnell Washington. He can play basically a 6th tight end off the edge of the line there and go out and just catch monster touchdowns in the end zone, probably catch like 8 touchdowns for 50 yards on the entire season and just steal away touchdowns from Deontay Johnson again. We'll see if that happens. But no, I mean, it bodes well for Kenny Pickett. Obviously, he didn't have that great of a year 1 season. It wasn't bad, but I mean, you're throwing a touchdown rate equivalent to the lows of CJ Beathard over the last 6 years in the NFL. Only a touchdown rate of 1.7% of all of your attempts in the league is not very good. The average is like 3.3, I believe. And once you get up to good, I mean, it's up to like 7.5. So he was atrocious in the touchdown rate last year, and that's why Deontay Johnson wasn't good. I do believe, though, the real controversy of this offense, at least in the fantasy community, though, is what is the split between Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren? And that's where I'd like to get your opinion on this is what do you think is actually the truth between these 2 running backs? Do we go back to the old school ways of Mike Tomlin? And I know I just said it's not Mike Tomlin's offense, but every offense that has been under him is, hey, we have an absolute bell cow hammer. And that's what Najee has been whenever he's been healthy. But now we have this up-and-coming guy in Jaylen Warren. What do you think is the split that we see here?
I do think that the Steelers offense is going to adapt the more modern NFL look. And I think while Najee Harris is more than happy to try and bell cow this, he did get banged up last year. He was healthy down the stretch, but they still had Jalen Warren, involved. And I don't think this is going to be a detriment to Najee Harris, but I do think it's gonna be like a 60-40 split. I do think it will, or close to it, maybe 63-37. But I think it's going to be Najee's show. Jalen Warren's worth rostering. Until we figure out what's really going on here, he's worth rostering. He might be a really good best ball opportunity, dart opportunity there. And then if something does happen with Najee, Jalen can step in and carry some more of that workload. But I'm not really worried about Najee Harris. In fact, I'm super optimistic with Najee Harris simply because they have an improved offensive line. His foot's healthy. He doesn't have a metal plate in there running around like he did last year. Like, Najee's a very good football player. And I think people forgot that because he played through injury. And so I guess in the NFL, or I guess in the fantasy realm, you get docked for that, for playing through injury. And now people are kind of down on him. And you see an up and coming, exciting running back in Jalen Warren, and people are like, oh man, he's going to take over. No, he's not. No, he's not. Najee Harris was a first round running back. Like, there's a reason why they put him in that situation. I still think Najee has top 12 potential for this year. I think Jalen Warren is worth rostering, though.
Obviously, he's worth rostering. I think in pretty much any format. I think the difference really here comes into obviously what does the workload look like. I would lean more towards Najee Harris is going to be more of the traditional bell cow running back. Now, does he get like an 80%, 85% workload? No, I don't think that's going to be realistic in today's NFL. And I don't think Jalen Warren is much better than that to command more of the workload. But as long as he's healthy, I do think this is Najee Harris, probably like 70% workload. I don't even think it's 60%. I think it is closer to a 70% workload, just because until Mike Tomlin proves me wrong, I'm just going to trust that he's going to do that. And he even came out recently and said, this is going, like, we're just trying to keep these guys healthy until the season starts, because we've been dealing with it throughout the last couple of years. Najee Harris was hurt in camp last year, and that's where he picked up that thing in his foot. Like, it wasn't a thing that happened during game. It was during the training camp, and it was a thing that he dealt with all the way. I think it was until week 9, whenever they had their bye week. He dealt with it all the way through that, and they could never really use him as a workhorse back. His carries per game upticked. I think it was 5 touches per game higher whenever he came back off of the bye week compared to before the bye week, because he was hurt throughout all of that time. I think that this is going to be the same old Steelers offense. I know people love the burst and agility that Jalen Warren does possess, but I think it is more of a, what do we call it, like year one version of Ezekiel Elliott and Tony Pollard. Maybe that's a little bit more of the split that we see, where Ezekiel Elliott still has a commanding load of this offense, and Tony Pollard or Jalen Warren here has these very good, very productive touches, but I don't think the touch load is going to be there for him to actually negatively affect Najee Harris.
Yeah, that's fair. I'm perfectly fine with that. I think they'll use him. They'll have situations where they use him. But yeah, this is Najee Harris's show. So diving into the wide receiver room here, obviously Deontay Johnson, 1 touchdown last year. Was it 1, or did he actually have 0? Did he get
goosed?
That's right.
Got goosed.
So he's due for some positive regression, you'd imagine, based on that touchdown rate you just talked about with Kenny Pickett. Like, positive things should happen for Deontay. So I'm fully confident in him being the wide receiver 1 on this team. People thinking that George Pickens is taking over they're higher than a kite. George Pickens is a very good catcher of the football. He's very exciting. He's that dog, as you like to say. But he's the wide receiver 2 on this team. He's going to have some really good catches. He's going to have some good games, but he's going to be super inconsistent. He's going to be Gabe Davis, where if you started him that week and he had 2 touchdowns, you're pumped. You're going to start him again the following week. He's going to have 1 catch for 9 yards, and you're going to be like, well, that was not it. So I think consistency will be a problem for Pickens. Allen Robinson, don't really care about. I think I don't even know what to make of A-Rob at this point in his career, but Calvin Austin might have a dart opportunity for some best ball, get a touchdown type of situation. But it's really, for me, pass catching. It's Deontay Johnson, Pat Freiermuth, then George Pickens. I think that's kind of like the pecking order that we'll see this pan out. And then in the red zone, you're going to see a bunch of Darnell Washington. Bunch of Darnell.
Yeah, I think I had the tweet that whenever Fryermuth caught that 40-yard bomb, I was like, I know that I said Fryermuth was going to be a between the 20s tight end, but I didn't account for him scoring from the 40. I'll adjust. So maybe Fryermuth does catch 40, like 4 touchdowns from the 40-yard line, but I do really believe that they're going to use. I mean, we've seen it in the past. It was Eric Ebron, I believe, that had like 8 touchdowns in one of these offenses, or maybe that was with the Colts. Anyway, that's the type of role that I believe Darnell Washington could play for this team. I mean, whenever you have that type of athletic freak monster who can just go up into the back of the end zone, one-hand ball, and just say, I'm like 8'5" right now with my hand up and not even jumping. And this 6-foot DB is never going to touch me or get anywhere near this ball. Kenny Pickett just lay it up here in anywhere between like an entire trampoline area, and I will catch it for a touchdown. Like that's what's going to happen, and they're probably going to do that about 6 times, I project, this year. So no, I mean, I really like Darnell Washington for the touchdown upside, but I just don't think he's going to be usable week over week. Pat Fryermuth will be a between the 20s guy. I think he'll have a lot of yardage, but I just don't know what that touchdown upside is if Darnell Washington does take the role that I project. And I'm with you. Deontay Johnson over George Pickens. We've been vocal about it on this podcast, on this YouTube show. We're both on the same tread line here. I mean, it is Deontay Johnson is the wide receiver 1 over George Pickens. As much as George Pickens is a very good NFL wide receiver, unfortunately, in fantasy football, we don't get points for fancy catches, and that's what George Pickens does. Is he goes up and he makes very good NFL catches, but they're just very good NFL catches. And unless he starts getting 8-10 targets a week, it's just not really going to happen. And we've had reports, and I want to bring this up as I have it here in front of me. We've had reports saying that he's really improved his entire route tree. He's really improved as wide receiver overall. And just want to give you some stats. And this is from Joe Daigle. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name, but major contradiction between camp reports and George Pickens' preseason usage. Reports transformed route tree. His preseason go routes is 27% per PFF chart tracking. As noted throughout the offseason, Pickens has led the league in go routes at a 19.4% last year. So from a 19.4% last year, whenever you did not like him because he was wide receiver 40 overall last year, he's now upped that from last year's percentage in the preseason. Now he's running those type of routes at a 27% clip. His route tree, at least as they're using him now, has not expanded. And it's Deontay Johnson and it's Pat Fryermuth underneath. George Pickens is go guy. He's a very good wide receiver. But beyond that, just steer me away from it, man. He's a fancy Gabe Davis.
Yeah, I think that's the big thing that people miss is like a lot of times the NFL drafts players or utilizes players in a specific role. Like they just want them to do specific things. And while George Pickens might be able to develop certain things, this offense wants him to run downfield. They want him to do his hook routes, his comebacks, and his go routes. But that's what they want. And that's what he's good at. Like they want him to go up and catch those one-handed balls. They want him to go to pull those defenders downfield so that when you have, Deontay Johnson underneath and you have Pat Fryermuth underneath and you have Najee Harris out of the backfield, like you still want to have that threat downfield. It's going to be Pickens, Calvin Austin stretching the field. Like that's how they're going to use him. It's unfortunate because, I'd love to see what Pickens could do. Bottom line, we ain't going to see it. Like they're showing us in the preseason. So I do think he's going to have some very good games. I think he's going to have, an overall good stat line. He'll probably be what he was last year, like a wide receiver 40, that same kind of range. And people are going to still hype up those catches. So it is what it is.
There's an upside to get to like wide receiver 25, but really, what does it matter between wide receiver 25 to wide receiver 40? There ain't that much.
Nope, there really ain't. So that wraps up our AFC North. Let us know in the comments down below what your thoughts are, who you love, who you hate. Maybe you're really down on Lamar in this offense. We want that hate. Let us know. Tell us all about it. But make sure you like the video though before you dog on us and what our take is. Subscribe to the channel, and thank you so much for joining us here in the Fantasy Draft Room.